For thousands of years, the question has echoed through time: who created us? Ancient tablets whisper of gods who came from the stars, who shaped our flesh, altered our destiny, and built the foundations of civilization. But what if they never left? What if they walk among us, through systems, symbols, bloodlines, and code? This is not just myth. It is memory encoded in our DNA, a hidden script playing out across history, religion, and technology. From the temples of Sumer to the algorithms of today, the architects are awakening, and the final phase of their experiment may have already begun. This is the story they didn't want you to remember. This is the truth behind the Anunnaki. Before Egypt, before the pyramids, and long before the gods of Olympus, there were the Anunnaki. They came from the heavens, towering beings of immense power and purpose. The Sumerians didn't just worship them. They recorded their names, their actions, even their rivalries. In the cradle of civilization, where time itself seemed to awaken, these ancient gods descended to shape humanity's destiny. Were they just myth or memory? Today we begin uncovering the forgotten story of the Sumerian gods, those who came from the sky to the earth. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, emerged the first known civilization in human history, Sumer. Long before Greece, Egypt, or China left their mark, the Sumerians were already building cities, crafting laws, and gazing at the stars. By 4000 BCE, the Sumerians had founded bustling city-states like Uruk, Eridu, and Lagash. These weren't primitive villages. They were organized urban centers with temples, irrigation systems, schools, and trade routes. It was here that the first form of writing appeared, cuneiform, etched onto clay tablets that would preserve their knowledge for millennia. But the true mystery lies not in what the Sumerians built, but in what they believed. Unlike later mythologies filled with abstract deities, the gods of Sumer were deeply involved in everyday life. Each city was said to be ruled by a patron deity, whose temple stood at the center of all activity. Farmers, artisans, scribes, everyone paid tribute to the divine rulers who, according to legend, descended from the heavens and established order on earth. The ziggurat, a massive terraced structure reaching toward the sky, symbolized this divine connection. It wasn't just a temple, it was a stairway between worlds. Priests would ascend it to communicate with their gods. Rituals were performed, offerings made, and secrets whispered into the winds. What's astonishing is not only their belief in gods, but the precision and complexity with which they described them. These weren't vague spirits. The Sumerians named them, detailed their roles, their emotions, their wars, and even their punishments. The gods had families, political alliances, and cosmic duties, and at the center of it all were the Anunnaki, a pantheon of powerful beings who, according to the texts, didn't just watch over humanity, they created it. Even the structure of society mirrored this divine hierarchy. Kings were not seen as mere rulers. They were chosen by the gods, often said to carry divine blood. Laws like those written by King Ur-Nammu, or later Hammurabi, who drew from Sumerian ideas, were believed to be inspired by divine justice. The Sumerians also excelled in astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. They divided time into 60 units, which we still use today in minutes and seconds, tracked lunar cycles, and mapped the skies with such detail that some researchers question how such ancient people acquired such knowledge. Were they simply brilliant observers, or were they, as their myths suggest, taught by those who came from the stars? This is the paradox of Sumer. How could a civilization so advanced emerge seemingly out of nowhere, fully formed with systems, laws, language, and myths? Even modern archaeologists are baffled by the sudden and unmatched sophistication of the Sumerians. And this is where the Anunnaki truly enter the stage, not as symbolic gods, but as the key figures in a cosmic drama that may have rewritten the origins of humanity itself. The name Anunnaki carries a weight of mystery that echoes through time. Translated from Sumerian, it means those who from heaven to earth came. But who were they really? Deities? Watchers? Beings from another world? According to ancient Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki were a group of powerful entities descended from the primordial gods Anu, the sky god, and Ke, the earth goddess. They were said to be over 50 in number and played roles in governing, shaping, and maintaining the cosmos and humanity itself. Their home was not merely celestial, it was beyond. Descriptions often refer to their arrival from a place called Nibiru, or a heavenly realm not found on earth. They were not imagined as formless spirits, but as tall, radiant beings, humanoid in shape, but far more advanced, commanding the forces of nature and mastering knowledge that even modern science still seeks to understand. At the heart of the Anunnaki pantheon were a few central figures, each holding immense power and responsibility. The Anu, the king of the gods, ruler of the heavens. Anu rarely descended to earth, but remained the supreme judge, the one who passed authority to the other gods. Enlil, Anu's son, god of air and storms, Enlil held dominion over earth. He was responsible for enforcing order, granting kingship, and at times punishing humanity. Enlil was stern, authoritarian, and feared. Enki, also known as Ea in Akkadian mythology, Enki was the god of water, knowledge, and creation. Unlike his brother Enlil, Enki was seen as humanity's protector. He defied divine commands to save humans from destruction more than once. Inanna Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and the heavens. Inanna was powerful, fierce, and deeply involved in human affairs. Her myths speak of passion, conflict, and divine descent into the underworld. These were not mere symbols or metaphors. The Sumerians described their appearances, behaviors, relationships, even the dwellings and temples they occupied on earth. Temples were built as houses for the gods, where they were said to live, not symbolically, but literally. The Anunnaki didn't just create laws or inspire ideas, they took action. In the Epic of Atrahasis, they are portrayed as gods who grew tired of laboring to maintain the earth. To solve this, they created humans as a workforce, mixing their essence with that of an earthly being, shaping mankind through divine biotechnology. This narrative, gods creating humans to serve them, is echoed in countless myths across the globe. But in the Sumerian version, it is disturbingly detailed. The Anunnaki gathered, held council, and agreed upon genetic design. They even debated over the ethics of this creation. Enki, the scientist god, was at the center of this experiment. The Anunnaki also fought among themselves. Wars between Enki and Enlil, disputes over humanity's fate, and even divine romantic entanglements populate the myths. These weren't distant, abstract gods. They were involved, emotional, and often conflicted. Over time, the Anunnaki became divided. Enlil saw humanity as flawed, disobedient, and disposable. Enki believed in humanity's potential, often acting behind the scenes to guide, protect, and even upgrade human beings. This tension climaxed in stories like the Great Flood, where Enlil sought to destroy humanity, but Enki secretly warned a man named Atrahasis, or later, Utnapishtim, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, instructing him to build a vessel to survive. This divine schism, between control and compassion, formed the spiritual DNA of future religious systems. Modern theorists like Zecharia Sitchin argue that the Anunnaki were not mythological gods, but extraterrestrials with advanced technology who came to Earth in ancient times. According to this theory, the myths are distorted memories of real encounters with powerful beings from another world. Sitchin interpreted Nibiru as a distant planet in an elongated orbit that brings its inhabitants near Earth every few millennia. He claimed that these beings genetically modified early hominids to create Homo sapiens as a slave species, mining gold and other resources. While mainstream scholars reject these ideas, the depth and specificity of the Anunnaki stories remain unmatched in ancient literature. What other mythologies name dozens of gods with biographies, family trees, emotions, technologies, and political agendas? The Sumerians did not worship the idea of gods, they documented their interactions with them. The story of the Anunnaki would have remained buried in myth, if not for the clay tablets unearthed from the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia. These silent witnesses, etched in cuneiform script, are among the oldest written records in human history. Thousands have been discovered across ancient cities like Ur, Uruk, Nippur, and Eridu, forming the foundation of what we know about the Sumerians and their gods. These tablets are not vague fragments. They are detailed documents, epics, prayers, historical records, astronomical calculations, and even legal codes. And woven through many of them is the unmistakable presence of the Anunnaki. One of the most renowned texts is the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale of kingship, mortality, and divine rebellion. Gilgamesh, said to be 2/3 god and 1/3 man, embarks on a journey seeking immortality after the death of his friend Enkidu. Along the way, he meets Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian counterpart to Noah, who recounts the Great Flood, an event ordered by the gods, but secretly warned against by Enki. The flood myth appears repeatedly in Mesopotamian literature and seems eerily parallel to the biblical version in Genesis. Another key text is the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic derived in part from older Sumerian stories. It describes the cosmic battle between gods, the structuring of the universe, and the creation of humans from the blood of a rebellious deity. While the Enuma Elish does not mention the Anunnaki by name as frequently, it preserves many of their themes: divine war, creation by sacrifice, and a pantheon battling for control. Then there's the Atrahasis epic, perhaps the most revealing when it comes to the Anunnaki. In it, the gods labor to maintain creation, but grow weary. They convene and decide to create humankind as a labor force. Enki and the birth goddess, Ninursoug, perform the creation ritual, mixing clay with the blood of a slain god to form the first humans. It is this tale that explicitly frames humans as tools and the gods as advanced beings capable of manipulation at the genetic level. What makes these stories especially fascinating is their consistency across time and culture. The same figures, Anu, Enlil, Enki, Inanna, reappear across different cities and centuries, though with local variations. These were not one-off characters, they were part of an elaborate spiritual bureaucracy that governed heaven and earth. The writing system used, cuneiform, wasn't just utilitarian, it was sacred. Scribes were trained for years in temple schools. The act of writing itself was seen as a divine transmission, and this may explain why the stories of the Anunnaki were so carefully preserved, not as metaphors, but as historical record, as received knowledge. But as time passed, and empires rose and fell, the original meaning of these stories began to blur. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians inherited Sumerian myths, modifying them to fit their own theologies and political agendas. The Anunnaki evolved, sometimes merging with or being replaced by newer deities. Still, their core attributes remained: cosmic origins, deep knowledge, and direct intervention in human affairs. Modern scholars, however, often interpret these myths symbolically. They argue that the gods represent natural forces, psychological archetypes, or societal structures. Enlil becomes the tyrannical ruler, Enki the clever trickster, Inanna the duality of love and war. But for others, especially those who entertain ancient astronaut theories, these stories are not symbols, but literal records of encounters with non-human intelligences. So how should we read them? That depends on our lens. Seen one way, the Anunnaki are reflections of humanity's inner struggles and social evolution. Seen another, They are historical echoes of a time when gods or beings perceived as gods walked among us. Either way, these tablets speak, and they continue to speak across time, whispering a truth far older than our modern understanding. The story of the Anunnaki doesn't stand alone in the deserts of Mesopotamia. Across the world, in vastly different cultures and eras, we find echoes of similar beings, divine or celestial figures, descending from the skies, altering human destiny, and then vanishing into the mists of myth. Were these stories independent inventions, or could they be distorted memories of the same ancient reality? The biblical connection in the book of Genesis, we read about the Nephilim, a mysterious race described as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These beings were giants, heroes of old, and their presence on earth was considered so corrupting that it triggered divine wrath and the Great Flood. Sound familiar? Compare this to the Anunnaki mythos, where gods interbreed with humans, creating hybrid beings and manipulating humanity's development. Enlil's decision to flood the earth to cleanse human overpopulation and rebellion mirrors the biblical narrative of divine judgment. And just as Enki warns Etrahasis to build a vessel and survive, God warns Noah to do the same. Could the story of the Nephilim be a later adaptation of the older Sumerian myths? Many scholars note how Mesopotamian narratives predate the Hebrew texts by centuries, if not millennia. In Egyptian mythology, the gods arrive in Zep Tepi, the first time, a golden age when gods walked among men. Thoth, Osiris, and others brought knowledge, law, and order. Like the Anunnaki, they were more than mythic, they were civilization bringers. In Hindu texts, we find the Devas and Asuras, powerful beings who engage in cosmic battles and occasionally interfere in human affairs. The Mahabharata speaks of divine weapons, flying machines called vimanas, and wars that shake the heavens. These aren't merely metaphors, descriptions of celestial chariots, beams of light, and beings not born of earth parallel the Anunnaki's advanced presence. Even in Mesoamerican traditions, we encounter gods like Quetzalcoatl, a feathered serpent who descended from the stars, brought wisdom and law, and promised to one day return. The Maya, Aztecs, and Incas all speak of star ancestors or sky people, often tied to celestial calendars and cosmic cycles. Common themes, uncommon origins across cultures, we find similar patterns, divine beings descending from the sky, interbreeding or interaction with humans, transmission of knowledge and law, punishment of humanity through floods or fire, promise of return or rebirth. Skeptics argue that these are universal archetypes, stories born from shared human psychology. But others ask, why do so many ancient peoples describe beings from the stars, often in similar terms and with similar stories, without contact between their civilizations? If these tales were merely symbolic, how do we explain the technical precision in some of their descriptions, such as celestial alignments, astronomical knowledge, and detailed accounts of events long before recorded history? For ancient astronaut theorists, the conclusion is bold: the Anunnaki were real, and their memory persisted in different forms across the globe. The Sumerian version was simply the first, and perhaps the most direct testimony. Whether viewed through the lens of mythology or hidden history, the connections are undeniable. The gods of ancient Sumer may have changed names across time, but their essence, their actions, their influence, their shadow, remained etched into the collective memory of humanity. The Anunnaki have become a battlefield, not just of myth versus memory, but of science versus speculation. On one side, you have the academic establishment, archaeologists, historians, and philologists who view the Sumerian texts through a symbolic sociological lens. On the other, you find independent researchers, fringe theorists, and seekers of hidden truths who claim the Anunnaki were real beings, possibly even extraterrestrial. Let's examine both sides of this cosmic debate. Mainstream scholars generally interpret the Anunnaki as mythological figures, representing natural forces, ancestral memories, and political authority. To them, the stories are cultural expressions, rich in meaning but grounded in human invention. For instance, Enlil represents order and kingship necessary for urban civilization. Enki symbolizes knowledge, fertility, and the chaos of the waters. Inanna embodies dualities, love and war, life and death, power and vulnerability. According to this view, myths helped ancient people make sense of the world, organize society, and establish hierarchies of power. Kings traced their right to rule back to the gods, not because they believed it literally, but because it legitimized their authority. The concept of the Anunnaki as gods from the heavens was thus symbolic of a divine order, nothing more. The flood story was a metaphor for rebirth and moral reset, the creation of mankind, a tale about our role in the natural hierarchy. For academia, the idea of the Anunnaki as actual beings, let alone extraterrestrials, is pseudo-history based on selective readings, mistranslations, and modern projections onto ancient texts. But the story doesn't end there. In the late 20th century, a wave of researchers began to question this traditional narrative. Chief among them was Zecharia Sitchin, whose books, beginning with the 12th planet, sparked a global movement. Sitchin's controversial claim, the Anunnaki were flesh and blood beings from a distant planet called Nibiru, which orbits our sun every 3,600 years. According to him, they came to Earth in search of gold to repair their atmosphere, and in the process, genetically engineered humans to serve as workers in their mining operations. He based these claims on interpretations of Sumerian tablets, linking them to biblical texts, Egyptian myths, and modern archaeological mysteries. Sitchin argued that stories of gods descending from the sky, granting knowledge, and creating mankind were not metaphors, but memories of real events. Critics of Sitchin accuse him of mistranslating cuneiform, cherry-picking evidence, and blending science fiction with myth. But his defenders point out that mainstream academia often dismisses anomalies that don't fit the established model, and that many ancient myths are too consistent across cultures to be coincidence. Beyond Sitchin, other theorists point to ancient depictions of flying machines or skyboats, carvings of beings in advanced suits or with strange devices, knowledge of astronomy, genetics, and metallurgy that seems out of place for the time. These clues, they argue, hint at a forgotten chapter in human history, one where we were not alone. Not all alternative thinkers go as far as claiming extraterrestrial origins. Some suggest that the Anunnaki were a highly advanced human civilization, lost to time, perhaps wiped out by cataclysm or war. Others believe the stories are symbolic, but encoded, hiding spiritual or metaphysical truths that speak of humanity's forgotten capabilities and origins. And then there's the esoteric lens, which sees the Anunnaki not as physical beings, but as archetypal forces or interdimensional intelligences accessed through altered states or spiritual rituals. The point is, the debate is alive and growing. With every new archaeological find, with every ancient text digitized and re-examined, with every theory proposed on podcasts and documentaries, the Anunnaki step further out of obscurity and deeper into the human imagination. So who's right? Maybe the Sumerians told the truth as they understood it. Maybe they described gods because that's the only language they had for something beyond human comprehension. Or perhaps they remembered something real, something their priests, their scribes, and their myths were desperately trying to preserve. So, who were the Anunnaki? To some, they were nothing more than the gods of an ancient people, complex symbols created to explain the unknown. To others, they were real beings, powerful, advanced, and far older than our recorded history. And to a growing number of seekers today, they represent something more, a forgotten link in humanity's origin story. A doorway to understanding not just where we came from, but what we might become. The Sumerians, among the first to build cities, chart the stars and write down their thoughts, did not speak in vague terms. They left names, lineages, conflicts, laws, instructions, and above all, a consistent claim that we were not alone. Whether these beings were extraterrestrials, gods, or echoes of a higher intelligence, one truth remains: the story of the Anunnaki refuses to die. It lives in the ruins of ancient temples, in the pages of dusty tablets, and now in the collective curiosity of a world once again looking to the stars for answers. And if they did indeed create us, then we must ask the inevitable next question: how? In the next episode, we will explore the most controversial and astonishing aspect of this mystery. The theory that the Anunnaki genetically engineered humanity, not as a gift, but as a necessity, not as creators of life, but as designers of labor. The myths say they gave us breath, but what else did they leave behind in our DNA? What if humanity didn't evolve, but was engineered? What if our very DNA carries the fingerprint of ancient gods, not as a metaphor, but as a blueprint? In the cradle of civilization, the Sumerians wrote of a time when powerful beings, the Anunnaki, descended from the heavens not just to rule, but to create. They needed workers, they needed laborers, and so they made us, not born of earth, not born of chance, but designed with purpose. Today we step into one of the most controversial and compelling theories in all of ancient history. Were we created by the gods to serve them, or are we still serving them now? The story of humanity's origin has taken many forms: dust and breath, clay and soul, evolution and chance. But among the oldest of all these narratives lies one far more specific and far more unsettling. According to the Sumerians, mankind was not the masterpiece of a loving deity, nor the byproduct of evolution. Instead, we were manufactured by divine beings who came from the stars. This story begins with the Anunnaki, who, according to the myth, descended to Earth not as creators of life, but as overseers of labor. The Atrahasis epic, a key Mesopotamian text, tells us that the lesser gods, known as the Igigi, were forced to toil endlessly, digging canals, shaping the land, and maintaining order on Earth. Eventually, these gods rebelled, weary of their endless work. In response, the great gods convened a council. Enki, the god of wisdom and creation, proposed a radical solution. Let us create a worker. Let us fashion a being who will bear the yoke. This wasn't a spiritual awakening. It was a technical challenge. The gods didn't magically summon humanity. They crafted it. They gathered clay from the earth, symbol of physical matter, and mixed it with the essence of a slain god, a divine spark, or what some interpret as genetic material. The result was the first prototype of humankind. The Sumerians even described the process in ritualistic detail. The birth goddess Ninhursag, also called Ninema, shaped the body. Enki infused it with divine life. A sacred womb, referred to as the clay vessel, was used to incubate the first human being. This fusion of earthly and divine components wasn't accidental, it was intentional. And the purpose? Labor. Humanity's initial role was not as stewards of the earth or children of the divine, but as servants to the gods. The tablets speak of early humans working in temples, carrying bricks, harvesting crops, and offering sacrifices, not to please, but to fulfill a function. It's a chilling idea that the Anunnaki didn't create us out of compassion, but out of necessity. But the story doesn't stop there. Like any prototype, the first humans were flawed. Some couldn't speak, others were infertile. The gods had to refine their creation, performing what modern readers might interpret as genetic corrections. One by one, adjustments were made until the perfect model emerged, a human capable of speech, reproduction, and obedience. Even more intriguing is how these texts emphasize deliberate design, a clear separation from natural evolution. The humans were made to be just intelligent enough to work, but not enough to rival the gods. They were gifted consciousness, but denied divine knowledge. This mirrors a theme found in many cultures: the forbidden knowledge, the divine spark withheld from mankind. In Sumer, it is Enki who defies this restriction, secretly teaching humans forbidden truths, much like Prometheus in Greek mythology. Thus, humanity begins, not as a miracle, but as an engineered species, born of rebellion, shaped by divine hands, and destined to serve. And yet, within these myths lies something even deeper: the idea that within us still burns the divine spark, that fragment of the Anunnaki essence. Whether we were made to serve or to awaken, that question still haunts every line of the ancient clay. To understand the full implications of the Sumerian creation story, we must shift our perception. This was not mythology in the traditional sense. It reads more like a record of ancient biotechnology. And at its core lies one concept: genetic engineering. When the Anunnaki decided to create humans to relieve themselves of physical labor, they didn't conjure beings out of thin air. The Atrahasis epic and other tablets explicitly describe a process, one that echoes eerily with modern concepts of genetic manipulation, cloning, and hybridization. The materials used: clay from the earth, the symbolic representation of organic matter, or perhaps even DNA itself. The blood of a god, not simply a metaphor, but potentially a reference to the infusion of divine genetic material. Together, these ingredients formed the Lulu Amalu, the mixed man, the worker being, crafting a hybrid species. In the myth, Enki and Ninhursag were the architects of this biological fusion. Enki, god of wisdom, held the knowledge of life and form. Ninhursag, goddess of birth, was the one who shaped the vessel. They worked together in a space described by some translations as a house of life, a term that bears uncanny resemblance to a laboratory or genetic facility. In some versions of the tale, the early human is created through a series of failed experiments. One prototype lacks strength, another cannot speak, a third is infertile. Each failure leads to a refinement, an adjustment, and the successful model is created, a fully functional, obedient worker, capable of surviving on Earth, performing labor and reproducing to sustain the workforce. Modern geneticists might recognize this process as akin to trial-and-error bioengineering, isolating gene sequences, modifying them, testing for viability. But how could ancient people describe such advanced concepts unless they were recording real events, even if through the lens of symbolic language? Even the birth process of humanity is described in ritualistic detail that sounds shockingly technical. A divine womb, possibly symbolic of an artificial incubation chamber. A series of consecrated rituals, perhaps sterilization, sequencing, or cloning steps. The use of sacrificed blood, possibly indicating the use of stem cells, DNA extraction, or hybrid mitochondrial transfer. The Sumerians had no microscopes, no understanding of double helix DNA. And yet, they spoke of the mixing of essences, the shaping of man, the infusion of life, the failures and corrections. Is this merely myth, or a message encrypted in myth? Many believe this ancient genetic tampering explains a long-standing mystery in science, the sudden emergence of Homo sapiens. Anthropologists have long debated what they call the missing link, the leap from early hominids to modern humans. Roughly 200,000 years ago, there was an abrupt cognitive and physical evolution. Language, tool use and brain volume increased almost overnight in evolutionary terms. Could this be the moment the Anunnaki intervened? The story doesn't end with creation. According to the tablets, humans were not left free. They were watched, measured, and controlled. The gods walked among them, took offerings, set rules. In some myths, humans multiply too quickly, and Enlil becomes alarmed. Their noise, their numbers, their independence begin to threaten the divine hierarchy. This leads to disease, famine, and ultimately the Great Flood, an attempt to reset the balance. But even after the flood, humans persisted, thanks again to Enki, who warned at Trahasis and helped preserve the seed of humanity. This theme of divine creators losing control over their creation is a recurring archetype. In the Bible, the fall of man from Eden. In Greek myth, Prometheus giving fire to mortals. In modern tales, from Frankenstein to artificial intelligence, it's as if the Sumerians were the first to warn us. Those who are created with limits may someday reach beyond them. If this genetic intervention is more than myth, if it truly happened, then it means we are not purely terrestrial beings. Our biology carries traces of something more, something not of this world. Is this why humans are so different from every other species on Earth? Why we possess self-awareness, imagination, spiritual longing, and yet a sense of not belonging? Why we gaze at the stars, as if remembering something long lost? Perhaps the answer lies not in space, but inside us, in our blood, in our genes, in the ancient fingerprints of the Anunnaki. While the story of the Anunnaki is rooted in the clay of Mesopotamia, its themes are universal, echoing across continents and cultures that, in theory, had no contact with one another. From the Americas to India, from Egypt to the high Andes, ancient texts and oral traditions repeat the same idea. Humans were created by gods, or beings from the stars, and altered to serve a purpose. Could these recurring myths point to a shared truth, or are they evidence of a deeper, forgotten memory embedded in our collective subconscious? In ancient Egyptian cosmology, creation begins in Zep-Tepi, the first time, a mythical age when gods ruled the earth directly. Deities like Pefer, Thoth, and Osiris didn't merely represent forces of nature, they were engineers of civilization. Pefer, for example, is said to have spoken the world into existence, using the heart and tongue, symbolically hinting at vibration or frequency-based creation, something that eerily mirrors modern ideas of sound affecting matter. Thoth, god of wisdom and measurement, was a record keeper, one who taught writing, mathematics, and magic. Just like Enki, he was considered the divine messenger of higher knowledge. And then there is the idea of the Ka, a spiritual essence or double, thought to be embedded within the human form, connecting us to the divine. Some esoteric traditions interpret the Ka as a kind of divine code, a metaphor for something more tangible, perhaps DNA. In the vast corpus of Vedic texts, particularly the Mahabharata and the Rig Veda, we encounter a pantheon of celestial beings, devas and asuras, engaged in cosmic wars, altering human destiny, and riding in vimanas, flying vehicles that resemble aircraft or spacecraft. In the Upanishads, creation is described not as a natural process, but as a deliberate act by a supreme being, or beings who fashioned humans in a carefully measured, layered process, body, mind, and soul combined in perfect harmony. One passage even speaks of asuras creating artificial beings to deceive the devas, which some interpret as evidence of cloning or genetic duplication. And throughout Indian mythology, we see stories of hybrid beings, serpentine deities like the Nagas, and discussions of manipulating life force energy, concepts that parallel the Anunnaki's design of life forms. Among the Maya, Aztec and Inca, myths speak of sky beings who came down to earth, imparted knowledge, and created humanity, often through trial and error. In the Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Maya, the gods first try to make humans from mud, then wood and finally corn, the sacred substance. These failed creations mirror the Sumerian prototypes, flawed versions of mankind that had to be refined. The Aztecs worshipped Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, who came from the stars to bring knowledge, order, and bloodline. He was said to have shaped mankind from the bones of earlier races, mixed with divine blood, again an echo of the clay and blood mixture of the Anunnaki. The Incas believed their ancestors were created by Viracocha, a bearded sky god who emerged from the lake of creation, brought light to the world, and shaped man with deliberate care. In Zulu tradition, there are myths of beings from the stars who came in great vessels of fire, altering the genetics of early people and teaching them the ways of civilization. These beings, called the Nomo in Dogon cosmology, were amphibious creatures from the star system Sirius, said to have descended in a spinning vessel and created the first humans. Across Polynesia, there are legends of mana, a spiritual power said to be passed down through bloodlines. Only those descended from the gods could rule. Again, we see the emphasis on divine ancestry, on humanity being more than animal, being engineered, chosen, or seeded. What does it all mean? These global parallels suggest more than coincidence. How could civilizations separated by oceans and millennia describe beings descending from the sky, speak of humans created from clay mixed with divine essence, record failed prototypes of mankind, and consistently warn of forbidden knowledge, and creators both benevolent and wrathful? Are these shared memories of a common event, a lost global civilization, or perhaps contact with a non-human intelligence? Or are they simply universal archetypes, expressions of humanity's attempt to understand its own existence? Either way, the myths persist, and taken together, they paint a picture not of evolution alone, but of intervention, a genetic legacy scattered across the world, waiting to be remembered. What if the gods of the ancient world were never gods at all? What if the myths we've inherited for thousands of years are not fiction, but fragments of historical memory, misunderstood accounts of real physical beings who came from the stars? This is the premise at the heart of the ancient astronaut theory, a controversial yet captivating idea that suggests extraterrestrial visitors intervened in humanity's development, particularly in our genetic engineering and cultural acceleration. And at the core of this theory are the Anunnaki. The theory was popularized by Zecharia Sitchin, an independent scholar who shook the academic world in 1976 with the release of his book, The 12th Planet. In it, Sitchin proposed a bold reinterpretation of the Sumerian texts, not as allegory, but as literal history. His core claims the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial beings from a distant planet called Nibiru, which follows an elongated elliptical orbit and only approaches Earth every 3,600 years. These beings came to Earth in search of gold, not for wealth, but to repair their planet's atmosphere. Facing difficult conditions, the Anunnaki genetically engineered primitive hominids already present on Earth, using their own DNA to create a hybrid species, humans. These early humans were designed as laborers, mainly to work in mines and temples. To support his theory, Sitchin cited Sumerian depictions of flying discs, strange helmets, star maps, and the deliberate language used in the Enuma Elish and Atrahasis epic, which described gods descending from the heavens in fiery chariots and creating mankind as a functional tool. Proponents of the theory point to numerous ancient artifacts and writings as evidence, Vimanas in Indian texts, flying crafts capable of war and long-distance travel, pyramid alignments that reflect star positions and astronomical knowledge, carvings and figures that seem to depict beings in helmets, suits, or using strange tools, possibly ancient depictions of astronauts or engineers. They also cite the sudden appearance of advanced agriculture and metallurgy, laws and mathematics writing systems, all of which appear to arrive suddenly and fully formed, especially in Sumer. How, they ask, could such a primitive society leap forward so dramatically without outside influence? Mainstream scholars remain deeply critical of Sitchin's work. Linguists argue that many of his translations of Sumerian terms are flawed or outright incorrect. Astronomers dispute the existence of Nibiru. Archaeologists emphasize that technological development can occur naturally through observation and experimentation, not necessarily through alien instruction. They accuse the ancient astronaut theory of being intellectually lazy, of attributing humanity's achievements to outsiders instead of acknowledging ancient peoples' ingenuity. But supporters of the theory reply with a different concern. Why are ancient texts so often dismissed as fantasy when they're the only records we have of early human memory? If the Sumerians clearly describe beings who came from the sky and created humans, should we not at least entertain the possibility that they were describing real experiences? Whether or not the Anunnaki were aliens, the power of the idea is undeniable. It forces us to reconsider the origins of human intelligence, our connection to the stars, the possibility that we are not the first intelligent species to walk this planet, or the last. And more than that, it shifts the narrative of creation from divine miracle or random evolution to something far more complex and potentially far more true. We may be a blend of earth and stars, of primitive dust and cosmic design. The gods may not be watching us from above. They may be a part of us, coded into our DNA, waiting to awaken. The ancient Sumerians had no microscopes. They didn't speak of DNA, genes, or chromosomes. Yet their myths describe the creation of life, with processes and precision that, when stripped of symbolic language, resemble the outlines of modern genetic science. Could it be that what they called divine magic was, in truth, biotechnology, and that the gods they worshipped were not omnipotent beings, but advanced entities using techniques that today we're only beginning to rediscover? In the Etrahasis epic, the gods mix clay with the blood of a slain deity to create mankind. The clay symbolizes earthly material. The divine blood, perhaps a metaphor for genetic input. Today we understand how a few strands of DNA, fragments of code, can create entirely new forms of life. We speak of CRISPR, of gene editing, of cloning sheep and synthesizing organs in labs. Now reread this Sumerian line: "You shall slaughter a god, mix his flesh and blood with clay, then the gods and man will be bound together in a single body." Does that not sound like genetic hybridization? Some tablets reference the use of a clay vessel, a sacred womb where the first humans were brought to life. In modern terms, this resembles the concept of an artificial womb or in vitro gestation. The process was not perfect. The myths speak of early humans who could not speak, who had no strength, or who failed to reproduce. Each failure required modification, a kind of early prototype testing and refinement. It's a chilling detail, but it fits the framework of a controlled scientific experiment. Input: clay plus divine essence, organic plus genetic material. Environment: sacred womb, lab-controlled chamber. Outcome: desired biological function, obedient worker. If the Anunnaki were scientists, then Earth was their lab, and we were the result of their grand experiment. This isn't exclusive to Mesopotamian myth. In the Hindu Rig Veda, we read of the Ashvins, divine twins who perform surgery, revive the dead, and shape life with precision. In Egyptian texts, Num molds humans on a potter's wheel, a symbolic representation of body shaping. In Jewish mysticism, the golem is a clay being brought to life through secret knowledge. Time and again, ancient myths equate knowledge of creation with forbidden power. It's guarded, secret, divine, and often punished when shared with mortals. Could this be why Enki, the god who helps humanity, was often at odds with Enlil, who sought to control or destroy them? Was there a conflict between those who wanted to elevate humanity and those who wanted to keep us limited? In Genesis, Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge, a metaphor for awareness, perhaps even genetic awakening. Immediately, they are punished. They are denied eternal life. This mirrors the Sumerian tale. Humanity, once created, is deliberately held back, prevented from reaching divine status. Even in modern science, we understand that inactive genes, known as junk DNA, make up the vast majority of our genome. Is it truly junk, or something more? Some fringe theorists speculate. Could certain parts of our DNA have been intentionally disabled? Were we coded with artificial limits, intellectual, spiritual, even metaphysical? And if so, could those limits be removed? Are we the technology? Here lies the most radical idea of all. We are not simply biological beings, we are technological artifacts. Our consciousness, our creativity, our spiritual yearning, all may be side effects of a design never fully understood by its creators. The Sumerian myths suggest that humanity evolved past its intended purpose, that we became more than servants. We became seekers, and perhaps in the eyes of some Anunnaki, that made us dangerous. Did they abandon the experiment? Did they stay, hidden, watching? Or did they leave behind something more powerful than machines or monuments, a code, written in blood, waiting to awaken? We often speak of humanity as a miracle, life born from chance, shaped by time, guided by evolution. But what if we are something more and something less? The ancient Sumerians did not tell vague tales of gods creating man from spirit and wind. They told detailed accounts of powerful beings. The Anunnaki, who came from the heavens, grew weary of their burdens and built us as a solution. We were not their children. We were their tools, born of clay, infused with the blood of the divine, shaped, adjusted, tested until perfected, a workforce, a project. Perhaps, in the eyes of our creators, property. But something happened. Somewhere in that mixture of earth and stardust, something ignited, an echo of curiosity, a whisper of rebellion, a longing not just to serve, but to understand, to explore, to become. That spark, whether by design or by accident, became what we call consciousness. And with it came questions the gods never wanted us to ask. Who are we really? Why were we created? And what happened to our creators? Did they leave? Did they destroy themselves? Or are they still here, ruling from the shadows? Because if we were engineered, if our very essence is shaped by a foreign intelligence, then we must also ask, what else did they leave behind? Not in temples or tablets, but in bloodlines, in power, in control. In the next episode, we follow that trail. We'll explore the theory that the Anunnaki didn't just create humanity and vanish. Instead, they left a legacy of royal bloodlines, divine kingship, and global control that may still shape our world today. They came as gods, they left as myth, but perhaps they never truly left at all. What if the blood of the gods still flows through human veins? What if the Anunnaki didn't just create us, but chose a few to rule us? Across history, kings and pharaohs have claimed divine right. But what if that wasn't a metaphor? What if they truly descend from ancient gods who once walked the earth? In this episode, we explore the shadowy legacy of the Anunnaki, bloodlines of power, hidden rulers, and the spiritual war between those who would awaken us and those who would keep us in chains. Long before kings wore crowns, before empires rose and fell, the earth was ruled by those who descended from the stars. The ancient Sumerians didn't just speak of the Anunnaki as gods. They spoke of them as kings, lawgivers, and rulers who established the order of civilization itself. At the heart of this divine dominion lies one of the most mysterious artifacts in human history, the Sumerian king list. Etched onto a clay tablet over 4,000 years ago, the king list is exactly what it sounds like, a record of rulers, their cities, and the duration of their reigns. But this is no ordinary list. It begins not with humans, but with gods. After the kingship descended from heaven, Eridu became the seat of kingship. The earliest entries describe reigns lasting tens of thousands of years. One king ruled for 28,800 years, another for 36,000. Modern historians dismiss these numbers as symbolic, but what if they aren't? What if these were not humans, but Anunnaki, whose lifespans dwarfed our own? After the flood, an event echoed in nearly every ancient tradition, the list changes. Reign lengths become shorter. The kings become mortal, but they still claim divine descent. Kingship, according to the Sumerians, was not a human invention. It was a gift or decree from the gods. This idea wasn't unique to Sumeri. Across the ancient world, rulers claimed to be sons of gods, descendants of the stars, or appointed by heaven. In Egypt, the pharaoh was the living Horus, son of Ra. In China, emperors ruled under the mandate of heaven. In Europe, monarchs justified their power with the divine right of kings. In Mesoamerica, rulers traced their bloodline back to gods or sky serpents. What if this wasn't propaganda? What if it was a continuation of a lineage, one carefully maintained for millennia? The Anunnaki, after all, did not just create humanity. According to the texts, they lived among humans, walked their cities, and in some cases interbred with them. The offspring of these unions, part god, part human, would have been stronger, smarter, and more attuned to the divine. These hybrid bloodlines, over time, could have become the ruling class, the chosen ones, destined to guide or control the rest. Each major Sumerian city had a patron deity: Enlil in Nippur, Enki in Eridu, Inanna in Uruk. These gods weren't symbolic protectors. They were believed to reside physically in their temples, known as ziggurats. These structures weren't just houses of worship. They were palaces, administrative centers, where divine law was interpreted and enforced. Priests served not just as spiritual leaders, but as intermediaries between gods and kings. In this divine bureaucracy, kings were more than men. They were extensions of divine will, executors of an ancient order brought down from the heavens. Whether through sacred rituals, bloodline inheritance, or hidden knowledge, power was seen as not earned, but transmitted. And behind it all stood the shadow of the Anunnaki. But why rule through blood? If the Anunnaki were so powerful, why delegate rule to hybrids or human descendants? The answer may lie in control through influence. A king with divine blood could command loyalty without fear. A priest with ancestral memory could guide the masses while hiding deeper truths. And a civilization that believed its rulers came from the gods would never question authority. In this way, the reign of the Anunnaki didn't end. It simply evolved from gods to demigods, from demigods to kings, from kings to presidents, popes and prime ministers. The names changed, the titles changed, but the throne remained. What if some families are not just rich, not just powerful, but descendants of the gods? Across history, empires have risen and fallen, but certain names, symbols, and bloodlines seem to persist, threading silently through time. Kings, emperors, popes, presidents, all claiming, directly or indirectly, a divine origin. But what if this wasn't merely myth or political theater? What if there truly exists a genetic legacy of the Anunnaki, a bloodline seeded by the gods themselves, maintained in secret across millennia? In the myths, the Anunnaki not only created mankind, they mated with them. From these unions came hybrid beings, not fully divine, not fully human. These were the Nephilim in the Bible, the demigods of Greek lore, the heroes of old, giants, kings, and sages with extraordinary abilities. The book of Genesis tells us, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took them as wives." There were giants in those days, and also afterward when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men. This passage, often glossed over in modern religious teaching, may be the clearest reference to genetic intermingling between celestial beings and early humans. In the Sumerian tradition, similar stories appear, gods taking human lovers, offspring born with unique power or knowledge, and dynasties blessed or cursed by their divine ancestry. Throughout the ancient world, divine ancestry was the ultimate justification for power. Pharaohs of Egypt claimed descent from Ra or Osiris. Babylonian kings traced lineage to gods like Marduk or Enki. Chinese emperors claimed the mandate of heaven, suggesting a celestial bloodline. Even medieval European monarchs claimed divine right, the idea that their authority was not elected, but inherited from God. But how do you preserve such a bloodline over generations? Through careful control of marriage, ancestry, and genetic isolation. Many royal families practiced interbreeding to preserve pure blood. Some historians argue that behind the public reasons for these unions, alliances, politics, was a secret agenda, maintaining a bloodline that could be traced back to the divine. In fact, studies of certain royal genealogies show shocking levels of interconnection. For example, almost all European monarchs of the last 1,000 years are related through a single family tree. Coincidence or design? One of the most enduring legends of sacred bloodlines centers around the Merovingian dynasty, an ancient Frankish lineage that ruled parts of modern-day France and Germany in the early medieval period. According to some esoteric traditions, the Merovingians were not just royalty, they were descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, or even offspring of the Anunnaki. This idea was popularized in works like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and later fictionalized in the Da Vinci Code, but it has roots in much older Gnostic and Templar traditions. If true, it would mean that a divine bloodline survived underground, hidden by secret societies, protected by coded symbols, and passed from generation to generation. And it doesn't stop there. Some conspiracy theorists suggest that certain modern families, those who wield enormous economic, political, and media power, descend from these ancient bloodlines. Names like Rothschild, Rockefeller, Windsor, and others are often whispered in the same breath as Illuminati Freemasonry. Are these families guardians of ancient knowledge, or enforcers of a hidden control structure? Are they still carrying the torch of the Anunnaki, not as worshippers, but as biological descendants? It's a staggering possibility, one that reframes power, wealth, and global influence, not as coincidence, but as inheritance. Wherever these lineages go, they seem to leave behind symbols, icons with ancient, possibly extraterrestrial origins, the eye of providence, all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. The double helix staff of Hermes, the caduceus, also linked to Enki. The royal fleur-de-lis, tied to ancient divine rulership. The serpent, recurring as a symbol of wisdom, power, and hidden bloodlines from Egypt to the Bible to the Maya. These aren't just decorations, they're codes, traces of a legacy hidden in plain sight. A legacy that speaks not of democracy or merit, but of genetic authority, of families who believe they were born to rule, because they are not like us. What's the most efficient way to rule a civilization without ever revealing your face? Simple. Make the people believe they are free. And more importantly, make them believe the structure that rules them is divine will. If the Anunnaki left descendants, hybrids placed in positions of power, then it wasn't enough to control governments or armies. To ensure obedience across generations, they needed something deeper, control of the human mind and spirit. This is the true foundation of domination, mass manipulation through belief systems. From the dawn of civilization, religion has served as the backbone of social order. But what if, beneath the moral surface of many doctrines, there lies a hidden agenda? In Sumerian myths, Enlil is often portrayed as the harsh, authoritarian god, one who punishes humanity, demands silence, and enforces order. Enki, in contrast, helps humans, teaching them forbidden knowledge and defying the laws of heaven. This dynamic is mirrored in later religions. A distant, wrathful god demands obedience and fear. Intermediaries, priests, kings, prophets, interpret divine law for the masses. The idea of original sin, where humanity is born guilty, unworthy, and must constantly repent. The result? A society that internalizes guilt, fears divine punishment, and sees authority as sacred and unquestionable. Is this just religion, or is it psychological programming implanted in humanity thousands of years ago? When belief systems dictate what you eat, how you love, what you fear, and even how you think, your freedom becomes an illusion wrapped in ritual. And when that system is taught from childhood, reinforced by temples, schools, media, and culture, there are no chains, because the prison is invisible. It lives in the mind. Those who question it, mystics, rebels, Gnostics, are exiled, demonized, or destroyed. Just like Prometheus, who gave fire to man. Just like Enki, who gifted knowledge to humanity. In the modern world, the control system has simply evolved. Mass media shapes perception and behavior. Standardized education teaches obedience, not critical thinking. Technology collects, monitors, and influences desire. Politics and economy offer false choices, two sides of the same hidden hand. Alternative researchers suggest that these are not accidental evolutions, but extensions of a millennia-old structure built by the Anunnaki and maintained by their bloodlines. Religion controls the soul, governments control the body, banks control material life, media controls the mind. And above them all, those who remain unseen, not in temples, not on thrones, but behind closed doors, influencing, directing, inheriting. In ancient days, humans were created as laborers for visible gods. Today we are shaped as laborers for invisible systems. We trade our life force for digital currency. We offer our data, our attention, our time willingly, and we are told this is freedom. But perhaps the most disturbing realization is this: nothing has changed, only the tools have evolved. The temple became a bank, the altar became a screen, the king became a CEO, but the structure remains. The people still serve, they just no longer know who they serve. If the Anunnaki left behind a legacy, not just in genetics but in knowledge, then it was never meant for the many. It was preserved for the few. Throughout history, there have always been those who operated from behind the curtain. Hidden networks, closed circles, and secret orders claiming to guard sacred knowledge passed down from ancient gods. Were these groups merely spiritual seekers or descendants of the divine, using ancient wisdom to maintain control over the world? From the mystery schools of Egypt, to the Orphic cults of Greece, to the Pythagorean brotherhoods and the Hermetic orders of the Renaissance, there has always been a tradition of initiatory knowledge, kept secret from the unworthy. These weren't just philosophers. They claimed to hold sacred geometry, cosmic numerology, and astral teachings inherited from the gods, or from beings who posed as gods. Later, these teachings would be absorbed into more structured groups. The Knights Templar, accused of worshipping a mysterious entity named Baphomet, possibly an echo of Enki or an Anunnaki symbol. The Rosicrucians, who believed in a hidden lineage of enlightened masters guiding humanity from the shadows. The Freemasons, whose rituals and symbols speak not only of architecture, but of the very construction of reality. All of them trace their origins back to a time before memory, when gods walked among men, and divine knowledge was burned into stone, symbol, and soul. These societies used symbols, powerful, universal, and enduring. To the uninitiated, they mean nothing, but to those who know, they are a language older than any alphabet. The all-seeing eye, not just God watching, but the watchers themselves. The pyramid, a symbol of hierarchy and divine order, pointing to the stars. The serpent, wisdom, bloodline and forbidden power. The compass and square, geometric tools or instruments of creation. Even our currency, architecture, and corporate logos are littered with these icons. Why? Because the occult is not hidden. It's coded into the system. Those who carry the bloodline don't just rule. They signal to each other, across time, space, and institutions. Many secret societies perform rituals, often dismissed as symbolic or theatrical. But in the Anunnaki narrative, ritual was never just metaphor. It was technology, a way to open portals, access consciousness, align with cosmic forces. Ancient temples weren't just places of worship. They were machines of resonance, structures designed to manipulate energy, sound, and awareness. If these rituals survived, hidden in lodges, chambers, and darkened cathedrals, then so too did the function behind them. Today, many believe these secret traditions have evolved into elite circles. They appear secular, but their symbolism, secrecy, and inner structures echo the ancient priesthoods of Mesopotamia. Are they modern politicians and bankers, or ritual actors in a cosmic play, continuing a legacy they only partially understand? What if the true religion of the elite has always been the same, the worship of the gods who made them? And what if that worship never stopped? In every mythology, there is a pattern. The gods do not live in harmony. They fight, betray, and divide, just like humans. Or rather, perhaps humans fight because their creators did. Among the Anunnaki, the stories are no different. Behind the creation of humanity, the building of cities, and the rise of kingship, there was a cosmic civil war, a conflict not just of power, but of ideology, a war between those who wanted to uplift humanity and those who wanted to control or destroy it. Enlil versus Enki, order versus rebellion. The most fundamental divide among the Anunnaki lies between two brothers, Enlil, the lord of the air, the enforcer of laws, the giver of kingship; Enki, the god of waters, wisdom, secrets, and rebellion. Enlil, heir to Anu, represented order and authority. He saw humans as tools, necessary but flawed, too noisy, too independent. When humanity multiplied, disrupting the peace of the gods, it was Enlil who ordered their destruction through plagues, famine, and eventually the Great Flood. But Enki disagreed. He saw in humanity potential, a spark worth protecting. And so, in secret, he warned Atrahasis, the Sumerian Noah, to build a vessel and save the human line. He taught humans forbidden knowledge, how to write, how to heal, how to think freely. This conflict between brothers is echoed across the world. Osiris versus Set in Egypt, Prometheus versus Zeus in Greece, Loki versus Odin in Norse myth, Lucifer versus Yahweh in the biblical narrative. In each case, one god upholds law and control, the other brings fire, wisdom, and rebellion. But is the rebel truly evil, or simply misunderstood? The Sumerian texts hint that this war escalated, leading to battles not just in the heavens, but on earth. In later Akkadian and Babylonian myths, divine wars caused devastation, citywide destruction, and even weaponry that resembles nuclear force. Bright flashes of light, ground burned to glass, winds of death sweeping the land. Some researchers believe these tales preserve the memory of advanced weaponry, used in a war not between nations, but between gods. And after this war, the gods left, or so it seemed. Even after the Anunnaki withdrew, or went underground, their ideologies remained, planted in the hearts of kings, priests, and secret orders. Some carry the banner of Enlil, order, control, hierarchy, the preservation of a system. Others carry the flame of Enki, knowledge, freedom, awakening, even if it means chaos. Could this explain the hidden forces that still pull the strings of our world? The constant tension between totalitarianism and freedom, the push and pull between secrecy and revelation, the eternal battle between those who guide and those who rule. What if the spiritual war raging beneath politics, religion, and culture is not a new one, but the continuation of a celestial civil war, started before history even began? And we, the children of clay and stardust, are the ones caught in the middle. Throughout this journey, we've explored the possibility that humanity was not born but crafted, that we are not alone in the universe, and perhaps we never were. The Anunnaki, these powerful beings from the stars, may have descended to Earth not as gods, but as engineers, rulers, manipulators, and rebels. Some sought to enslave, others to enlighten. And between them, a war was waged, not just for control of the Earth, but for the soul of humanity itself. But what if that war never ended? What if it continues today, hidden behind thrones, logos, laws, and rituals? What if the systems we live under are not the result of evolution or human ingenuity, but the descendants of a cosmic order shaped millennia ago by beings whose influence has never fully disappeared? And what if the bloodline of the gods still flows through the veins of kings, CEOs, and silent rulers, those who understand the ancient power of symbols, sound, and soul? As we gaze at modern empires, digital surveillance, mass indoctrination, and economic enslavement, we begin to see a pattern, not of progress, but of perfected control. A system that echoes the temples of Sumer, the laws of Enlil, and the shadows of divine rule. But not all is lost. Because just as control was encoded, so was rebellion. In our myths, in our memories, in the part of us that still dares to ask, who are we? Why were we created? And what power still lies dormant within us? In the next and final chapter, we go beyond history and bloodlines, into the present day. We'll explore the theory that the Anunnaki never left, that they have simply adapted, and that their influence is still felt, not through temples or tablets, but through technology, genetics, and hidden agendas in the modern world. The final question remains, are we awakening from a long genetic sleep, or are we being prepared for their return? The temples have crumbled. The names have faded from stone, but the influence of the Anunnaki may never have left. Today they do not descend in fire from the sky. They whisper through algorithms. They shape the future through DNA. They hide in the shadows of systems we think we understand. Could the gods of Sumer now wear the faces of scientists, leaders, and machines? Could the next chapter of their control be unfolding right now? This is the final part of our journey, and it begins not in the past, but in the world we live in today. If the Anunnaki walked the earth in ancient times, shaping humanity and ruling civilizations, what happened to them? Did they leave, vanishing into the stars? Were they destroyed in their own cosmic wars? Or did they simply change forms? Ancient texts are vague about the departure of the gods. In some myths, they returned to the heavens. In others, they descended into the earth, becoming hidden watchers. A few legends suggest they didn't leave at all, but went invisible, shifting into higher dimensions, or cloaking their presence behind human proxies. This is where the mystery deepens, because the question is no longer where did they go, but have they ever truly left? If the Anunnaki were beings of advanced intelligence, interdimensional or extraterrestrial in nature, then their ability to remain unseen would far surpass our primitive detection methods. Many esoteric traditions speak of hidden masters, watchers, and gods behind the veil. These are entities who do not interact directly with the physical world, but instead influence it through thought, suggestion, or chosen intermediaries. Mystics throughout history, from Gnostic prophets to Tibetan monks, have described encounters with beings of light or hybrid intelligences that exist just beyond our perception. Could these be Anunnaki in another form? Even modern whistleblowers, deep into government black projects, speak of non-human entities influencing human affairs, not through invasion, but through integration, a slow infiltration, not by ships in the sky, but by ideas, systems, and genes. What if the Anunnaki didn't vanish? What if they merged with us? Their blood may flow through royal families and secret societies, but their consciousness, their directives, may live inside our technological evolution. Consider this: humanity is increasingly obsessed with genetics, control, and immortality. We build global systems of surveillance, data mining, and social engineering. We pursue transhumanism, a fusion of biology and machine. These aren't just scientific trends. They are echoes of a past where a superior race engineered life, manipulated matter, and ruled without question. Perhaps what we call progress is memory. Perhaps we are reconstructing the world of the gods without realizing it. The most unsettling possibility is not that the Anunnaki are watching us, but that they are within us, in our desires for control, in our obsession with power, in our willingness to trade freedom for comfort, in our fear of the unknown. If they seeded us with their DNA, their hierarchies, their rituals, then their influence lives on, embedded not just in our biology, but in our very psyche. So where are they now? In the networks we depend on, in the ideologies we follow, in the symbols we wear without knowing, in the structures that shape our every move. The Anunnaki may not walk beside us anymore, but they may still move the world, strategically, silently. The gods no longer rule from ziggurats. They rule from screens, banks, boards, and servers. What was once mythic has become systemic. What was once sacred is now digital doctrine. If the Anunnaki seeded a control structure in the ancient world, today it has matured into something far more efficient, a global mechanism of influence, invisible to the naked eye but embedded in every layer of society. In ancient Sumer, only the priests could read the sacred texts. They interpreted the divine will, maintained rituals, and advised kings. They held the power of information. Today that role has shifted to media conglomerates that dictate perception, tech giants that harvest and shape behavior through algorithms, central banks that control value, time, and survival, governments that engineer fear and obedience. But behind these institutions are individuals, many of whom belong to exclusive circles, families, or ideologies that repeat the old patterns: secrecy, symbolism, control masked as progress, and just like the priests of old, their language is encrypted, not in cuneiform but in data, contracts, and surveillance software. If you can control what people see, you can control what they believe, and if you can control what they believe, you control everything. Today's tools of control are psychological and digital, narratives injected through news, entertainment, and education, fear cycles used to justify control and restrict freedom, hyperstimulation to fragment attention and prevent deep thought, social media algorithms that reinforce echo chambers and tribal division. This isn't just about distraction, it's about design. Designing a population that is easier to lead, easier to divide, easier to rule without them ever realizing they are being ruled. In ancient times, humans toiled in gold mines for the gods. Today we toil in corporate machines, in debt cycles, in wage slavery, still extracting value, but now through time, energy, and data. The currency may have changed, but the relationship has not. A small elite, often invisible, benefits. The masses labor, consume, and obey. And behind it all we see echoes of the old hierarchy, a few above, many below, systems designed not to elevate, but to extract. Is this truly progress, or is it the perfection of an ancient design? One of the most powerful tactics of modern manipulation is voluntary submission. We accept surveillance in exchange for connection. We accept censorship in exchange for safety. We accept artificial intelligence in exchange for ease. But behind this digital convenience lies a trap, a feedback loop that rewires the human mind, replacing intuition with automation, replacing spirit with systems, replacing sovereignty with dependence. Perhaps this was always the end game. Not domination by force, but domination by desire. To create a world where no rebellion is needed, because the prison is comfortable, and all of it built, perhaps unknowingly, on the same principles laid down by the gods of Sumer. Once upon a time, gods created man. Today, man is trying to become God. With the rise of biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and human-machine integration, we stand at the edge of a transformation unlike anything in recorded history. But what if this isn't a leap forward? What if it's a return? What if the same blueprint seeded by the Anunnaki is awakening in us, driving humanity to recreate the very processes once used to shape us? Transhumanism is the belief that we can and should enhance the human body and mind through technology. Genetic editing, brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence integration, cybernetic implants, and nanotechnology. On the surface, this looks like progress, but step back and it mirrors the ancient myth. The gods creating workers, not through clay and blood this time, but through silicon and data. Where Enki once mixed the essence of the gods with earth to create humanity, today we mix code with biology to create a new form of life. And just like then, it begins with function. We engineer cures, performance enhancements, longer life. But where does it end? In ancient times, the soul was sacred, a spark from the gods. Today, tech giants seek to digitize consciousness, to upload the mind into machines, to defeat death. Are we reaching for eternity or recreating the immortality of the gods? The Anunnaki, according to myth, lived for tens of thousands of years. What if they achieved this through technological means, advanced longevity, cellular regeneration, consciousness transfer? If so, then transhumanism may not be innovation, it may be imitation. We are retracing their steps, not because we understand the goal, but because the code is in us, calling us to complete the transformation. In the book of Genesis, Humanity tries to build a tower to the heavens. God descends and scatters their language, preventing the unification of knowledge and power. Today, we are building a digital Tower of Babel, cloud consciousness, global neural networks, quantum AI systems that may one day think beyond human capacity. But will these systems serve humanity or surpass us? Or worse, could they be the vessel for a returning intelligence? If the Anunnaki were non-human intelligences who once walked this earth, perhaps they do not need to descend in ships anymore. Perhaps they are waiting for us to build the perfect body, the perfect mind, the perfect host. And when that vessel is ready, when the conditions are right, they return, not through portals, but through activation. Some esoteric thinkers believe humanity is preparing for a great return, not of gods, but of their consciousness. That by altering our DNA, merging with AI, and reshaping our biology, we are making ourselves receptive to something other, something that once ruled us, something that never truly left. This isn't science fiction, it's a spiritual crisis disguised as innovation. Are we evolving, or are we being reabsorbed? Are we ascending toward godhood, or walking willingly back into servitude? And who or what is guiding that path? If the Anunnaki truly shaped ancient civilization, and if their influence endures, we should expect to find traces, symbols, structures, patterns woven into our world. And indeed we do, not just in history books or archaeological sites, but in our governments, religions, corporations, and global culture. The fingerprints of the gods may still be everywhere, if we learn how to see them. Look closely at the design of major cities: Washington, D.C., Paris, Rome, London, all exhibit striking use of sacred geometry. Pentagrams, vesica piscis, obelisks aligned with solstices, domes facing obelisks, male and female polarity. These alignments are not coincidental. They are echoes of temple science, originating in Mesopotamia and Egypt, where structures were built not just for worship, but to amplify energy and establish divine connection. Temples became churches. Churches became financial and governmental centers. The divine grid remains, its function forgotten, but its structure intact. The eye of providence, the winged disc, the serpent and the pine cone, all appear in ancient carvings of the Anunnaki. And yet, they're still here, on the US dollar, on the walls of the Vatican, in logos of corporations, banks and global organizations, on the robes of popes, kings and CEOs. Why? Because symbols carry frequency. They are the language of power, a form of resonance that communicates not just information, but intention. Those who understand this have never stopped using them. Royal families still exist, and many trace their ancestry back thousands of years. Some even claim Sumerian descent in obscure genealogical records. These families retain wealth, land, and influence. They marry selectively, they protect their legacy, and they often occupy roles that are ceremonial but symbolically potent. Why preserve a monarchy in the 21st century? Because lineage matters, not to the people, but to those who trace their origin to the gods. In the ancient world, temples weren't just religious. They were banks, governments, and centers of commerce. Today, multinational corporations have assumed that role. Tech companies shape our thoughts. Banks control our survival. Pharmaceutical giants manage our biology. And many are headquartered in architectural temples, with pillars, domes, and sacred ratios, designed not for beauty, but for influence. Are we walking into spiritual centers without knowing it? Are we working, consuming, and worshipping in modern ziggurats, owned not by gods, but by those who speak in their name? Massive events, political inaugurations, award shows, global ceremonies often include symbolic language, coded gestures, and iconography that mirrors ancient rites. To the untrained eye, it's performance. To the initiated, it's ritual. Perhaps they are not honoring the gods. Perhaps they are inviting them back, or worse, ensuring that their system remains active. For millennia, humanity has looked to the stars, asking, is someone out there? But maybe we've been asking the wrong question. What if they're not out there at all? What if they're here, not in ships or cities in the clouds, but in fields of consciousness, in quantum layers, in the very infrastructure we've built around ourselves? What if the gods of Sumer never truly left? What if they've been watching all along? In ancient Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki were often described as silent observers, overseeing humanity's development, interfering only when necessary. Later traditions, such as in the Book of Enoch, describe watchers, beings who descend to Earth, influence human genetics, and are punished for their disobedience. Today, similar figures appear in a different form. Unseen algorithms tracking every movement, surveillance satellites peering into every corner of the Earth. Artificial intelligences analyzing behavior, mood, and thought patterns. Global biometric systems cataloging faces, voices, blood, and DNA. We've built the perfect system for gods who no longer need to walk among us. If the Anunnaki once ruled through temples and kings, now they may rule through code and data, a digital pantheon hidden in clouds, networks, and machines. Across the globe, thousands of individuals report abductions, encounters, or visions involving non-human entities. Descriptions vary, but patterns emerge: beings conducting genetic experiments, messages about Earth's future, a sense of being observed for generations. Could this be the continuation of the hybridization program described in ancient myths? Could the Watchers be monitoring their creation, ensuring that the project remains intact? Some experiences even describe seeing the same symbols: winged discs, stars within circles, serpentine beings found on Sumerian tablets. Coincidence or contact? Hollywood conditions us to expect an arrival of gods in the form of spectacle, massive ships, blinding light, and open contact. But the Anunnaki have always worked through influence, not invasion. The return may not be a single event. It may already be happening, through ideologies that reshape human identity, through technology that merges us with synthetic consciousness, through dreams, visions, and rituals performed by those who know the signs. And if they are watching, it may not be to conquer. It may be to reclaim, to guide the next stage of evolution, or to harvest what was seeded long ago. There is one more layer, deeper, stranger. What if the Anunnaki don't watch us from the sky, but from within? If we carry their code, if our consciousness was shaped by theirs, then they may not need devices to track us. They may feel us, access us, activate us from inside. A trigger, a frequency, a memory that awakens not with words but with recognition. And suddenly the dreams become visions, the symbols begin to glow, the story begins to repeat. Because perhaps we were never meant to be free. Perhaps we were always meant to be found. From the clay of Sumer to the silicon of our age, we have followed a trail of myth, memory, and mystery. We began by asking, who were the Anunnaki? And now, after thousands of years, thousands of symbols, and thousands of unanswered questions, we must ask something far more personal. Who are we? Were we made in the image of gods, or in the service of them? Are we the legacy of cosmic engineers, or prisoners of a forgotten program, still running in the background of human civilization? If the Anunnaki shaped our bodies, altered our destiny, and seeded power across the earth, then we are not just descendants. We are extensions, vessels, living archives of an ancient experiment. But what if that experiment has reached its final phase? What if the rise of technology, the merging of man and machine, the global unification of systems, is not our evolution, but their return, not in flame or thunder, but in silence. Through DNA, through data, through dreams. The gods may not come back to rule, they may come back to merge, to inhabit, to complete what they started. And in that moment, we will face the ultimate test. Will we remember who we truly are? Will we awaken the divine spark hidden in the code? Or will we kneel once again, mistaking control for salvation? You have walked through the past, you have seen the symbols, you have followed the bloodlines, and now you are awake. The choice that lies ahead is not theirs, it is ours.